December 19, 1944. Ardennes Forest, Belgium. The snow was falling sideways, a silent curtain over a broken landscape. The thunder of distant artillery rolled through the pines like an approaching storm. Beneath the pale morning light, a single M4 Sherman tank crept along a frozen road, its steel tracks groaning against the ice. Inside, 5 men sat in near silence, breath misting in the cold, hearts thudding louder than the engine. They had been separated from their column during the chaos of the German counterattack, the Battle of the Bulge. Their radio crackled, useless. Fuel was low, ammunition lower. Then, from the mist ahead, came a sound every Allied tanker feared, the deep, deliberate growl of a tiger eye. Its silhouette emerged like a phantom through the fog, armor twice as thick, gun twice as long. The Sherman halted. Every man inside knew the odds. The Tiger's 80mm gun could destroy them before they even turned their turret. Yet in that frozen silence, the American crew didn't flee. They loaded a shell, aimed into the mist, and prepared to do the impossible. Because in the next few minutes, history would record something no one believed a Sherman could do. By the winter of 1944, the war in Europe had entered its most desperate and chaotic phase. After the success of the Normandy landing 6 months earlier, Allied armies had surged across France, liberating towns that had endured years of German occupation. Yet as the front stretched thin, supply lines grew fragile and confidence began to outpace caution. In the east, the Red Army was hammering toward Poland. In the west, American and British forces pressed against the borders of the Reich itself. But deep in the Ardennes, the cold, forested hills of Belgium and Luxembourg, the Germans prepared their final gamble. Adolf Hitler had staked everything on Operation Wacht am Rhein, a surprise counteroffensive aimed at splitting the Allied front, capturing Antwerp, and forcing the Western powers to the negotiating table. To achieve it, he gathered his last reserves, hundreds of thousands of men, over 1,000 tanks and the remnants of his elite panzer divisions. Among these, the fearsome Tiger I and Tiger II, King Tiger tanks represented the pinnacle of German armored warfare. Heavily armored and fitted with the devastating 88mm K-36 gun, they were nearly invincible in head-to-head combat. Their thick frontal plates could shrug off almost any Allied shell, and their long-range accuracy meant they could destroy an enemy before being seen. The Allies, by contrast, fielded thousands of M4 Sherman tanks were reliable, mobile but lightly armored. Its 75mm gun, and even the later 76mm upgrade, often failed to penetrate a Tiger's armor unless fired from dangerously close range or from the flank. American crews nicknamed their machines Ronsons, after the cigarette lighter slogan, "Lights every time." When hit, the Sherman's gasoline engine and ammunition racks could ignite instantly. Still, the Sherman's strength lay in numbers, mobility, and coordination. While a Tiger could dominate a duel, it couldn't fight everywhere at once. The Allied philosophy emphasized teamwork, combined arms, air support, and maneuver, turning the Sherman into a weapon of opportunity rather than brute strength. By December, snow blanketed the Ardennes. Temperatures plunged below freezing. The Germans struck without warning on December 16th, breaking through the thin American lines with overwhelming force. Panic spread. Entire units were cut off. Roads clogged with refugees, destroyed vehicles, and the dead. In this chaos, small, scattered tank crews became isolated pockets of resistance. Their radios jammed, fuel nearly gone. They fought blind, but relying on instinct, training, and courage. Somewhere near Bastogne, one such Sherman crew, 5 young Americans, far from home, found themselves facing a legend of steel and terror, a Tiger tank prowling the same forest road. That moment, brief, brutal, and almost unbelievable, would become one of the most talked-about tank encounters of the war. But to understand how such an impossible confrontation unfolded, we must first look deeper at the machines themselves, and the philosophy that built them. Because behind every clash of metal and fire lay 2 visions of war. One built on perfection, the other built on practicality, the Tiger. I had become a symbol of Nazi Germany's engineering prowess, a weapon designed not for quantity, but for domination. Introduced in 1942, it weighed nearly 57 tons, twice that of the Sherman. Its armor could reach 120 millimeters thick, and its main gun, the 80-millimeter KWK-36, was deadly accurate beyond 2 kilometers. Allied crews often never saw the shell that killed them, but for all its power, the Tiger carried its own curse. Its sheer weight strained its engine and suspension. Its transmission was fragile, its range limited, and maintenance nightmarish. In the mud and cold of the Ardennes, Tigers broke down more often than they fought. When they did move, their deep tracks carved the snow like trenches audible miles away. The Sherman, by contrast, was the complete opposite: simple, fast, and replaceable. Designed for mass production, the U.S. built over 49,000 of them by war's end. Crews could repair them with field tools, swap parts from wrecks, and keep moving, while the Sherman could rarely match a Tiger in direct combat. Its agility, mechanical reliability, and speed of deployment gave the Allies an overwhelming logistical edge. Yet on the battlefield, none of that mattered in a one-on-one fight. When a Tiger appeared, even veteran tankers felt dread. Its long-barreled 80-millimeter could slice through a Sherman's armor as if it were paper. A Tiger could destroy a Sherman at 2,000 meters, while the ID, Sherman's own gun, had to close within 500 meters for a chance at a kill. That imbalance created a psychological war as much as a mechanical one. Many American crews learned to use ambush tactics, striking from concealment, hitting the Tiger's flanks or rear, and retreating before return fire. Others relied on artillery and air support to even the odds. The British, recognizing this vulnerability early, developed the Sherman Firefly, refitting the tank with the formidable 17-pounder gun, capable of piercing a Tiger's armor at distance. But the Firefly was rare. In December 1944, most American units still fought with standard 75mm or 76mm Shermans. As the Battle of the Bulge raged, snowstorms grounded Allied aircraft. Tank battles once again became duels of visibility, patience, and luck. The dense forest nullified long-range advantages, forcing close-quarters engagements, a deadly equalizer. And in one of those frozen forests near St. Vith, a single Sherman crew would encounter a Tiger in conditions no tactician could plan for. The German crew, confident, well-trained, and heavily armored, believed victory was inevitable. The Americans, cold, exhausted, and running low on shells, and believed survival was enough. But war, in its strange and brutal rhythm, often turns on chance, a turn of the turret, a moment of fog, a decision made in panic or instinct. In that white silence, two machines of opposite philosophies would meet, one built for supremacy, the other built for survival, and what happened next would defy every rule of armored warfare. The human angle, inside the Sherman, inside the cramped hull of the Sherman, 5 men lived within inches of steel and fire. The driver, eyes fixed through a narrow slit, felt every vibration of the tracks beneath him. The gunner, his gloved hands trembling slightly, adjusted the elevation wheel, trying to steady his aim. The loader worked with speed born of terror, one shell after another, sliding each into the breach while praying they'd never need the next. These were not hardened veterans of armored warfare. Many were farmhands, factory workers, or college students months before. Yet by late 1944, they had fought across Normandy's hedgerows, through the ruins of France, and now into the frozen heart of Belgium. The war had stripped away illusions. Their tank was no fortress. It was a coffin on tracks, and they knew it. Still, they trusted each other. A tank crew lived or died by coordination. Every man attuned to the other's movements, every command carrying the weight of survival. Inside that steel shell, hierarchy faded. Experience, instinct, and courage mattered more than rank. When word spread of a Tiger operating nearby, they didn't panic. They loaded armor-piercing rounds, checked the turret traverse, and kept moving. Fear was constant, but routine dulled its edge. What drove them was something simpler: the will to make it home. The tactical angle, turning weakness into strategy. Every Allied tanker understood the equation. In a frontal fight, a Tiger wins. Every time. But combat was never fought on paper. The Sherman's only chance lay in maneuver, using cover, speed, and terrain to flank the heavier German tanks. Allied doctrine stressed shoot and scoot, fire, relocate, never stay still long enough to be bracketed. The Sherman's faster turret rotation and lighter frame gave it agility the Tiger lacked. In the forested terrain of the Ardennes, this mattered. The narrow roads and dense pines made the Tiger's long barrel a liability. Its turret traverse was slow and its visibility limited. In such an environment, even a weaker tank could strike first, if it saw the enemy first. The Americans learned to exploit that. They used smoke shells, deceptive maneuvers, and the element of surprise. Sometimes they'd fire to force the Tiger to turn, exposing its flank for a kill shot. Other times they'd bait it into a trap, drawing it into an ambush covered by anti-tank guns. But in isolated encounters like this one, there was no support, no coordination, only instinct. The Sherman crew would need to think like hunters, not prey, turning terrain and timing into weapons, and in war, courage often meant acting not because you were unafraid, but because you had no other choice. The technological angle, the machines that defined them, the clash between the Tiger and the Sherman was more than a battle between crews. It was a collision of two military philosophies. The Tiger I represented Germany's obsession with engineering perfection. Every plate of armor, every gear of its Maybach engine was designed with meticulous precision. It could destroy a Sherman with a single shot and take multiple hits before faltering. Yet this perfection was slow, expensive, and unsustainable. Each Tiger took over 300,000 man-hours to build. The M4 Sherman, on the other hand, embodied the industrial might of the United States. Built on assembly lines that once produced automobiles, it was standardized, modular, and fast to repair. Its armor was thinner, between 51 to 76 millimeter, but its speed and reliability made it the backbone of Allied armored forces. Technically, the Sherman's gun was inferior, but its gun stabilizer, primitive yet effective, allowed it to fire more accurately on the move, a crucial edge in fast skirmishes. Its gyro-stabilized turret, often overlooked, gave gunners a fleeting chance to aim even while advancing. Moreover, the Sherman's radio systems were superior, enabling units to coordinate movements in real time. Many German tanks lacked reliable communication, forcing commanders to rely on hand signals or flags, a crippling flaw in chaotic environments. The Tiger was a masterpiece of engineering. The Sherman was a masterpiece of logistics, and in a war of attrition, logistics would decide everything. But on that frozen road, none of those statistics mattered. Only nerve, timing, and luck would determine who lived to see another dawn. The stage was set. Two tanks, two ideologies, meeting by chance in the white silence of the Ardennes. The enemy's perspective. Inside the Tiger, the atmosphere was different, colder, more clinical. The commander, perched beneath the cupola, scanned the forest through Zeiss optics, his voice calm, confident. The gunner, trained for precision, adjusted his sighting cross with practiced efficiency. The loader reached for an 88mm shell, its brass casing gleaming in the dim light, weighing almost 20 kilograms. To the German crew, this was routine. They had faced Shermans before and had always won. Their Tiger was a fortress, its armor impenetrable to most Allied shells. They knew the statistics, the numbers, the fear their tank inspired. It was said that one Tiger could destroy a dozen Shermans before being stopped. But beneath the discipline and confidence, fatigue ran deep. Supply lines were crumbling, fuel scarce. The Ardennes offensive was faltering under the weight of its own ambition. The Tiger's mechanical reliability, never its strength, was becoming a burden in the bitter cold. Even the most skilled crews now fought with dwindling ammunition and low morale, yet pride endured. For these men, surrender was unthinkable. The Tiger was not just a tank. It was the last vestige of German dominance, the embodiment of Hitler's promise that technology could still turn defeat into victory. They did not yet know that on this frozen morning, their steel behemoth would face something far more dangerous than another Sherman. It would face a crew with nothing left to lose. Leadership and morale, the minds behind the machines. By the winter of 1944, the balance of leadership in Europe had shifted. The German high command was fractured, paralyzed by Hitler's increasingly erratic control. Orders were rigid, often suicidal, leaving field officers with little room for adaptation. The Allies, in contrast, embraced initiative and improvisation. American commanders like Patton and Bradley encouraged decentralized decision-making, giving sergeants and lieutenants the authority to act on instinct. This freedom fostered creativity on the battlefield, a key factor in survival for tank crews. In the field, leadership wasn't about medals or speeches. It was about calm, under fire. A good tank commander was part psychologist, part engineer, part gambler. He had seconds to interpret sounds, shadows, and smoke, to decide whether to advance or reverse, to hold fire or risk everything on one shot. Morale was fragile yet stubborn. Many Allied crews feared the Tiger but refused to let that fear control them. Humor, camaraderie, and sheer stubbornness became weapons in themselves. Crews painted names on their tanks: Fury, Lucky Lady, In the Mood. Reminders that behind the machine still beat human hearts. On both sides, these men shared more than they realized: exhaustion, hunger, and the quiet knowledge that death was never far away. Whether wearing an Iron Cross or a star-spangled patch, every tanker understood the same truth. In war, courage often looked like doing your duty when you were certain you wouldn't survive. The moral and psychological angle. Courage against logic, what made this encounter so unforgettable was not just the mechanical mismatch. It was the psychological defiance it represented. To face a Tiger and a Sherman was to confront inevitability. Crews knew the odds. They had seen friends obliterated in seconds, tanks torn apart before even spotting their killer. Yet still they fought, not because they believed they could win, but because they refused to yield. War compresses human emotion into the smallest moments: the flick of a switch, the pull of a trigger, the turn of a turret. In that compression, something primal emerges: survival instinct tempered by duty. The Sherman crew that faced the Tiger didn't think in terms of glory or history. They thought in terms of seconds: load, aim, fire, move. Meanwhile, on the German side, a different psychology ruled. The Tiger's aura of invincibility was both a weapon and a trap. Confidence could turn to complacency, domination to blindness. When you believe yourself untouchable, you stop expecting the impossible. And so the impossible came, because courage is contagious, and so is overconfidence. When those two forces meet on a battlefield, history bends. In that forest, as snow drifted down and visibility dropped to meters, both crews prepared for a confrontation neither could truly control. The Tiger, master of destruction, prepared to hunt once more. The Sherman, scarred and weary, prepared to fight one last time. Two machines. Two crews. Two stories converging into one moment where steel, instinct, and fate collided. And that moment, the clash itself, would become legend. The forest was silent except for the groan of metal and the whisper of falling snow. Somewhere ahead, the Tiger's engine rumbled, low, methodical, patient. Its crew scanned the tree line through the fogged lenses of their optics. Somewhere in that haze, they knew, an American tank was moving. The Sherman crew could hear it too. The sound was unmistakable, a deep mechanical heartbeat, too heavy to be anything but a Tiger. The commander, peering through the periscope, caught fleeting shadows between the trees. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. The crew knew what it meant. They had seconds to act. The driver eased the Sherman behind a cluster of pines, treads crunching through ice. The gunner's voice broke the silence. Target, 11 o'clock, 400 meters. The loader rammed a shell into the breach, the metallic click echoing like a heartbeat. The gunner adjusted the elevation. The commander whispered, "Wait." Through the fog, the Tiger moved into view, its turret slowly panning, its barrel slicing the air like a scythe. It was hunting, confident, unhurried. The Sherman's crew knew they couldn't win a frontal fight. Their 76-meter gun wouldn't pierce the Tiger's front armor, but the Tiger was turning or exposing a flank if only for a heartbeat. Now, the Sherman fired. The recoil rocked the tank, smoke filling the turret. The shell streaked through the air and struck the Tiger's side plate with a burst of sparks. A glancing hit, no penetration. The Tiger halted. Inside, the German commander barked an order, "Feuer!" The Tiger's 88mm thundered. The shell ripped through the air and struck a pine tree meters from the Sherman, exploding it into splinters. The blast rattled the crew's bones. The driver reversed, throwing the tank into cover. Another shell screamed past, then another. Each impact shook the earth. The Tiger was firing blind, guessing their position through the fog. The Sherman crew worked fast. The loader slammed another round and a high-velocity AP shell into the breech. The gunner aimed low toward the Tiger's exposed road wheels. Fire! This time the shot hit true. The shell punched into the Tiger's lower hull, jamming its track. Sparks and smoke burst from the impact point. The German tank lurched to a stop. The Tiger fired again, a near miss. The concussion tore branches from the trees above the Sherman. Snow cascaded down, blinding their sight line. They moved again, circling to the Tiger's right. The driver gunned the engine, steering through the smoke and snow, trying to flank. The forest closed around them, trunks flashing past like ghosts. The Tiger's turret groaned as it tried to follow, but its rotation was slow, heavy. It couldn't match the Sherman's speed. The American gunner lined up again. 150 meters, close enough to see the Tiger's iron cross through the mist. AP round loaded. Target in sight. Fire. The third shot struck home, the Tiger's side armor, just behind the turret ring. The shell punched through, exploding inside the crew compartment. Flame burst from the Tiger's vents. Smoke poured from its rear deck. Inside, chaos. The German loader screamed. The commander ordered the hatch open. Fire spread across the engine compartment. The smell of burning oil and metal filled the air. Outside, the Sherman held its aim. Barrel fixed on the crippled Tiger. The commander's voice was steady now. Hold fire. Through the haze, a white cloth emerged from the Tiger's hatch, fluttering weakly in the snow. The crew of the most feared tank in Europe had surrendered. To a Sherman. The radio crackled. Silence followed. No one spoke. The gunner exhaled, his hands shaking. The loader slumped against the turret wall, eyes wide. The driver stared straight ahead, breath visible in the cold air. For a long moment, nothing moved but the drifting snow. Then, slowly the Sherman advanced, barrel lowered, ready for anything, because in war nothing ever feels final until it is. The impossible had happened. A Tiger had fallen, not to air power, not to artillery, but to courage, precision, and chance. And the story wasn't over yet. The Tiger's engine sputtered once, then fell silent. Smoke coiled upward, black against the white snow. Inside, the German crew scrambled, burned, dazed, choking on fumes. Their commander pushed open the cupola hatch, his gloved hands shaking. Flames licked at his coat as he waved a torn map in surrender. The sight froze the Sherman crew. It was something they had never seen. A Tiger crew surrendering. For months, the Tiger had been a ghost of destruction. Allied soldiers spoke of it in whispers, the beast, the Panzer ghost. To see its crew give up felt unreal. The commander of the Sherman stared through the periscope, half expecting a trick. A hidden gunner, a feigned surrender. Hold position, he ordered. The barrel remained trained on the smoking wreck. Through the snow, 2 German crewmen emerged. Their uniforms blackened, faces streaked with soot. One limped heavily, his leg bleeding through torn wool. The other carried nothing but the white scrap in his hand. The Sherman's hatch opened. Cold air rushed in. The American commander climbed halfway out, pistol drawn. For a long moment, neither side moved. Only the hiss of burning fuel and the soft hiss of snow filled the air. Then, with a gesture almost weary, the German commander nodded. He dropped his weapon into the snow. The war, for them, was over. The Sherman's crew dismounted carefully, rifles ready. They circled the crippled Tiger, its armor still hot to the touch. Up close, the damage was startling. A single lucky shot had pierced a seam in the side plate, just behind the turret traverse motor. A mechanical weak spot. The explosion inside had been catastrophic, igniting the hydraulic fluid and forcing the crew to bail before they burned alive. The Tiger's hull bore the scars of multiple impacts, proof of the Sherman's desperate flanking maneuver. But only one round had truly mattered. One hit, one surrender. Nearby infantry, drawn by the sound of battle, soon arrived. They stared in disbelief at the smoldering hulk. Word spread quickly through the lines. A Sherman had knocked out a Tiger and captured its crew. It wasn't the first time such a thing had happened, but it was among the rarest. Reports later described how visibility, terrain, and sheer daring had turned the tide. Historians would later find after-action notes describing the event as a victory of nerve and skill over technical supremacy. But for the men who lived it, there was no sense of triumph. Only exhaustion. The Sherman commander helped the German officer to his feet. Both were young and barely 30. Their eyes met, and for a brief instant the divide between enemy and enemy disappeared. They were soldiers, survivors of a machine that devoured men faster than nations could count them. The Germans saluted quietly, a gesture of respect before being led away by the infantry. The Sherman crew watched as the Tiger's smoke thinned into the pale winter sky. They didn't cheer. They didn't speak. They simply climbed back into their tank, sealed the hatch, and drove on. For every victory, another battle waited. That night, as snow continued to fall across the Ardennes, the Sherman crew parked their tank behind a ridge. They shared cold rations and silence. The loader, his hand still trembling, finally muttered, "We shouldn't have made it out of there." The commander didn't answer. He didn't need to, because they all knew the truth. The difference between life and death in war was often no more than a second, or a single turn of a turret. By dawn, the wreck of the Tiger had frozen solid, a monument of steel and smoke half buried in the snow. Allied troops passing by stopped to look, some taking photographs, others just staring. To them, it was proof that even giants could fall, and for those who had faced it, it was proof that courage could sometimes outweigh armor. The field was quiet again. The snow buried the tracks. The war rolled on, but somewhere in that silence, history had shifted, ever so slightly, in favor of the underdog. And from that day on, the myth of the invincible Tiger was never quite the same. In the frozen stillness that followed the battle, word of the impossible spread like fire through the American lines. A Sherman took down a Tiger. It passed from one platoon to the next, whispered in foxholes and radio shacks, repeated with disbelief and pride. For the men of the armored divisions, it was more than just a battlefield report. It was hope. For months, the Tiger had been a shadow that haunted Allied crews. Entire training briefings were devoted to its weaknesses, though few had ever seen one up close and lived to describe it. Stories circulated of shells bouncing harmlessly off its armor, of platoons wiped out by a single Tiger in ambush. Its very name carried psychological weight, a weapon of fear as much as firepower. Now, that fear had been cracked. The engagement was reported in the logs of the unit operating near St. Vith, with coordinates marking where the Tiger had been destroyed. Military observers noted the tactical value of the terrain, dense woods that forced close combat and nullified long-range advantage. The after-action report described how the Sherman's flanking maneuver and precision targeting had succeeded where so many others failed. Though the exact crew names were often lost in the fog of war, similar accounts would surface from multiple armored battalions, isolated duels where Shermans, through quick thinking and nerve, bested superior machines. Each story carried the same undercurrent: initiative, teamwork, and instinct over engineering dominance. Commanders used these tales for morale. Training films and pamphlets soon circulated, showing diagrams of how to face heavy German armor, where to aim, how to move, how to outthink. The lesson was clear: you can win, even against a Tiger. Photographs taken by nearby infantry captured the aftermath, the Tiger's smoking hull half buried in snow, the white flag still visible on its cupola. The image would become one of countless small testaments to the changing tide of war in late 1944. For the Sherman crew, there were no medals that day, no headlines. They were ordered back into combat within hours, their tank refueled and rearmed. In the scale of the Ardennes, theirs was a small engagement, a skirmish swallowed by the larger chaos of the Battle of the Bulge. Yet in its symbolism, it carried the weight of something greater. When General Eisenhower's headquarters reviewed field reports from the Bulge, analysts noted the increasing confidence among U.S. armored units. The myth of German invincibility, the psychological weapon that had carried the Wehrmacht through early victories, was breaking down. The Tiger, once the spearhead of German armor, was becoming a relic of over-engineering, stranded in a war that now demanded mobility and endurance. Even German officers began to acknowledge the shift. Panzer commanders wrote in diaries that the enemy's courage has changed. They no longer fear the sight of our tanks. Supplies were dwindling, fuel scarce, and the once proud panzer divisions were reduced to fragments, their heavy machines abandoned when engines froze or gasoline ran out. In the weeks that followed, the Allies would push the Germans back across the Ardennes, closing the last great German offensive of the Western Front. The Tiger units, once symbols of dominance, became symbols of a dying empire. Machines too heavy for retreat, too few to change fate, but for the men who faced them, those moments of defiance, like that winter duel in the forest, remained etched in memory. It wasn't just about a tank defeating another. It was about the idea that courage could bridge any divide, that skill and composure could overcome even the strongest armor plate. The battlefields of the Ardennes would thaw in spring, revealing the wrecks of both Sherman and Tiger tanks scattered across the countryside. Yet that one burnt-out hulk, surrendered rather than destroyed, told a different kind of story. A story of survival. A story of belief. And a story that, in the heart of Europe's deadliest winter, proved that no machine, no matter how powerful, could break the will of men who refused to yield. The wrecks of the Second World War are long gone now, rusted, buried, or displayed behind glass. Yet some stories refuse to fade. The tale of the Sherman that made a Tiger surrender lives on not because of its scale, but because of what it revealed about war, courage, and the limits of human invention. The Tiger was the masterpiece of an empire obsessed with domination, a monument to engineering brilliance twisted by ideology. The Sherman was the product of a nation that valued practicality, numbers, and adaptability. When these two met in the frozen stillness of the Ardennes, the result was more than a duel of tanks. It was a clash of philosophies, power against persistence, precision against improvisation, perfection against humanity. The Tiger represented the belief that strength alone could decide the outcome of war. The Sherman proved that strength means little without flexibility, unity, and will. For the 5 men inside that Sherman, the battle was not about heroism. It was about survival, a desperate act in a world that had long stopped making sense. Yet in that act, they reminded history of something profound. Machines may define the battlefield, but men define the outcome. Every era of warfare inherits this truth. Technology evolves, faster, deadlier, more precise, but it remains only as effective as the courage and clarity of those who command it. The duel in the Ardennes was a moment when human resolve triumphed over mechanical supremacy, a small flicker of defiance in a war of giants, and perhaps that is why this story endures. Not as a tale of destruction, but as a testament to hope under fire. The Tiger's armor has long since cooled. The Sherman's tracks rest silent beneath the earth. But in the echo of that battle, in the hiss of snow on steel, in the heartbeat between fear and action, lies a reminder that no weapon, no matter how invincible it seems, can conquer the human spirit. The German tank crew surrendered that day, but what truly surrendered was the myth of invincibility itself.